It's time for Recipe of the Day. Back on October 15th, I told you how to cook butternut squash cubes in the air fryer. And my thinking there was that you'd have either the already cubed butternut squash that you can get at the grocery store in a container, already peeled, fresh in the produce department, or the frozen cubes. And I talked about how you can use either. One is better than the other, of course. The frozen ones just kind of get soft in the air fryer. They don't brown and caramelize, but you can cook them in there. It works. And of course, you could also get a whole butternut squash and peel it and cube it yourself, although that is a bit of a pain. And I found myself with a whole butternut squash and was thinking about what a pain it would be and decided to try just cutting it in half and cooking the halves in the air fryer. It works. And then bonus is you can scoop out those seeds and cook them alongside the squash as well. Butternut squash seeds are so good. So I'm telling you today about a side dish that uses the air fryer squash and seeds with a really spicy, delicious maple drizzle. But also, you can cook the butternut squash in the air fryer like this and then scoop it out to mash it or do a more plain butternut squash recipe. So you can just use the air fryer as a way to cook the squash if you don't want to have to use the oven because it's full of other things or because you just don't want to. So those are your options here. So yeah, today I'm telling you how to cook a halved butternut squash in the air fryer. The first thing you're going to do is just rinse off the butternut squash and then cut it in half lengthwise. So you have these two long halves. And then before you do anything else, put the halves into your air fryer and make sure they're going to fit. If they're too long, you can trim off the ends, or you can even trim off the ends and cut each half in half and then make them fit that way. Once you know that your squash pieces are going to fit into the air fryer, take them back out again and then use a spoon to scoop out the seeds and put them in a bowl. Set them aside. We'll get to those in a minute. Then you're going to rub both the cut flesh side and the skin side of your squash pieces with 2 teaspoons of cooking oil. That could be olive oil or vegetable oil, grapeseed oil, coconut oil, whatever it is you use. 2 teaspoons of that. Rub them all over and then sprinkle just the cut sides, just the flesh, with about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt total, so like 1/8 of a teaspoon each. Then you're going to put those squash pieces into the air fryer, cut side down, and set it to 400 degrees Fahrenheit and cook it for 15 minutes. While that is cooking, if you're doing the seeds, you're going to do those. If you don't want to have the seeds, you can throw them out. But if you're going to do the seeds, get the seeds and sort of separate them from the stringy flesh and then give them a good rinse so that they're nice and clean, the same way that you would do for pumpkin seeds. Then pat them dry with some paper towel. They do stick to the paper towel a little bit, so you're just going to have to scrape them off of there. And then you're going to mix those seeds with 1/2 teaspoon of cooking oil and a few teaspoons of salt. After the squash has cooked for those 15 minutes, you're going to flip it cut side up and then scatter your seeds all around the squash. Now you might be worrying right away that your basket for your air fryer has holes and the seeds are going to fall through them. It is true that will happen to some of them and it's totally fine. They cook underneath there. But if you wanted to prevent that, you could have used one of those air fryer parchment paper liners, and then that will stop all or most of the seeds from going through, depending on if those parchment paper sheets you use have holes in them or not. Okay. So then the squash with the seeds scattered around it goes back into the air fryer until the seeds are toasted and the squash is fork tender in multiple places. And really crucially here, I mean the narrowest part of the squash. You want to really double check there. This is funny, right? Usually you want to check the thickest part of something because that usually is what takes longest to cook. But when it comes to butternut squash, the narrow part is not where the seeds are and it's kind of denser. And the more bulbous part is kind of hollow where the seeds were, so it cooks more quickly. So you really want to test it in a couple places, make sure a fork goes in really easily. And once it does, you are done. That's going to take about 10 to 12 more minutes. After the first 15 minutes, you flipped the squash over, you added the seeds, and at that point it's 10 to 12 more minutes until fork tender and the seeds are toasted. Now, while that last bit of cooking is happening, you can make this delicious drizzle to put on your squash. And really, this is my favorite way to do this recipe. You have the air fryer squash halves. You have those toasted seeds, and then you're going to have this spicy maple drizzle, and you can just serve that all together, and it's really, really tasty. So what you're going to do is mix together a tablespoon of maple syrup, a pinch of cinnamon, and a pinch of cayenne. Mix that together, and then once the squash is cooked, you're going to drizzle it all over with that maple syrup drizzle, and then sprinkle the toasted seeds on top of that, and really take it to the table like that. It's just beautiful. This roasted squash halves with the drizzle all shiny and those seeds all around and on top. And then you cut each one into thirds to serve. So this will serve 6 people. Of course, you can skip doing the seeds, like I said, and you can skip doing the drizzle and then just use the squash in whatever recipe you want. It is now cooked butternut squash. You can scoop it out and put it into a soup. You can do a mash with maybe some butter and maple syrup, mash it up. So you have cooked squash. You can use it however you want, or you can do this delicious side dish that I told you about. Okay, I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes for this podcast episode, or you can head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there. Everything there is arranged by date, so it's helpful to know that today is November 12th of 2024. And if you like this recipe idea and want more wonderful ideas, and if you want to see how this is made, make sure that you are following me on social media. I am on TikTok, Pinterest, Instagram, and Facebook. And I think I just joined Threads, but I'm not entirely sure. Anyways, don't go on Threads yet. I'm not sure. But the other places that I mentioned, I am Cook the Story over there. I am Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, the all-new chicken cookbook, and from this podcast, Recipe of the Day. I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.